As Josh gets into a new relationship, uncanny trials are thrown his way to test his loyalty and commitment. Josh is casually dating Kayla. Although they act like a real couple, things aren't really official between them. As Josh takes Kayla on more dates and social gatherings, he one day introduces her as his girlfriend. When they get home, Kayla raises the topic of him calling her his girlfriend a few hours ago. Josh gets shy, and he asks if it's okay with her. She nods and says she likes it, but then she wonders if he'll miss the single life. Josh reassures her that he won't because he feels that they have something special. With this, they finally put a label on it, calling themselves girlfriend and boyfriend. As Josh pulls away from a kiss, he gets scared when he notices that Kayla has frozen. Thinking that she's having a stroke, Joke pokes her eyeball, but she remains motionless. He screams at her, trying to wake her up from whatever trance she's in. However, the room suddenly flickers, and when Josh turns, 3 female aliens have welcomed themselves into his home. They introduce themselves as copulating aliens from a planet that does exactly what they're named. Suddenly, they remove their clothes and approach Josh, pleading to sleep with him. Although he's stunned, Josh reacts quickly and shuns the aliens away. He declares that he's in a committed relationship, and if only they had come the day before, he would have been all over their offer. The aliens still throw themselves at Josh. However, he remains persistent about refusing their offers, so they hiss at him. The aliens explain that they can't help but crave him because he's irresistible. Hearing this, Josh gets flattered that they think he's handsome, but one of the aliens replies that they don't. They're blind but have extremely well-developed noses that can smell confidence. In a chorus, they claim that there's nothing more confident than a man in a committed relationship. They add that he secretes an aromatic musk that they can't ignore. Once again, they plead with Josh to sleep with them, and this time they bargain that it'll be quick. On their planet, this is ideal, and aliens like them prefer it. Although this astonishes Josh, he pushes them away. With another failed attempt, the 3 aliens gather together to devise a new plan to convince him. Suddenly, one of the aliens declares that they respect that he doesn't want to cheat on Kayla. However, she recommends smoking, watching the unrated Showgirls movie, then chilling. John sees through their plot and expresses how he's a man and not a piece of meat. Being firm in his stance, he says that he has a girlfriend, and they should return from where they came from. Finally giving up, the aliens agree to leave, but they tell him that they'll rub off to the thought of him later. Before leaving, one of the aliens aggressively sniffs Josh's underwear in front of him. Josh can only curse in disbelief just as the aliens disappear. He immediately runs to Kayla and kisses her. Finally, everything is back to normal, and Kayla expresses just how happy she is. The next day, Josh meets up with his friend Mike, and he tells him about the weird events from the other night. After hearing that Josh passed up the opportunity to sleep with the seductive aliens, he scoffs in disbelief. Josh explains that for the first time since he broke up with his ex, he finally found a girl with whom he genuinely likes hanging out. Suddenly, he gets a text reminding him that he has to be somewhere. Mike stops him, arguing that they initially planned to get high and look at bugs. However, Josh has already made plans to surprise Kayla at work with a box of salt-encrusted chocolates. This freaks Mike out, so he warns Josh that if he keeps going down this road, he'll get himself married. Although Josh reassures him that they just started hanging out, Mike asks if Kayla is leaving any items at his place. Pressured to answer, Josh says she left a few work clothes and almond milk. Hearing this breaks Mike's soul as he worries about the horrible future that might befall his dear friend. Josh reassures him that he knows what he's doing, then he leaves. As Mike is left alone, he thinks of an idea to save Josh. Meanwhile, Josh meets Kayla at the flower shop where she's working. She laughs as Josh happily enters the store, singing if she's ready for chocolates. After Kayla thanks him for the treat, he invites her for dinner, and she dives in for a kiss. Josh leaves the store feeling energized. However, 2 enforcers suddenly grab him by the arm. He ends up on a bus, dressed in an orange suit with a bunch of other men. Suddenly, Mike shows up in a sheriff's uniform, announcing that they've been gathered for the same reason. They're not married yet. He warns that if they continue staying in their committed relationships, they'll end up in the suburbs. As the bus slows down, the men see the daily lives of the husbands in the area. Some are raking their lawns, some are becoming pushovers by their unruly kids, others are washing cars, and one even takes out soiled diapers. The latter proves horrifying to the other men, except for Josh, who only wants to go home and cook dinner for Kayla. Shortly after, Mike makes a stop and instructs the men to get off the bus. As Josh sees a man grilling burgers on his lawn, he realizes that the suburbs aren't too bad. However, Mike reveals that those aren't hamburgers but portobello mushrooms. This is so disturbing that one man vomits at the mere sight. Still, Josh only thinks that portobello mushrooms would go great with quinoa. Just then, Mike gathers the men to meet Daniel Schultz, his guest speaker. The man has been married for 11 years, but according to him, he's serving a life sentence to his wife with no possibility of parole. Daniel claims that his wife Amy was fun when he first met her. She chugged beer faster than him and she loved being high. However, a month ago, she caught him smoking on their front porch, which made her cry. She told him to take his health seriously, so he started doing Pilates. He enacts just how he did it and tells this like a tragic story. Just as Daniel starts to make the men relate to his pain, Amy comes out of the house. Daniel immediately becomes docile and innocent. Amy asks if he has already called their friend like she asked, but he responds that it's next on his list. She blankly looks at him and says okay, then she goes back inside. Suddenly, Josh gets a text, so Daniel irritatingly asks what it says. Cornered, Josh opens the text from Kayla saying 5 little kisses for your cute little baby face. This makes Daniel furious, and Mike adds to the tension by saying he's the one he's talking about. He says that Josh is only 27 but is already in a committed relationship. This disappoints Daniel, and he says he'll definitely get Kayla pregnant, then he'll be married, and in no time he'll be dead. When the men return to the bus, they immediately start calling their girlfriends, making up stereotypical excuses for breaking up. Meanwhile, Mike closely observes Josh as he calls Kayla. However, he only tells her that he'll make portobello mushrooms with quinoa for dinner. Realizing that his scare tactic didn't work, Mike groans in defeat. Later that day, Josh goes to the grocery store to get ingredients for dinner. Just as he starts grilling the mushrooms, someone knocks on the door. To his surprise, it's his ex, Maggie. She apologizes for coming without notice, but she's going through something and needs Josh's comfort. Josh welcomes her into his home but gets surprised when she suddenly hugs him and breaks down in his arms. Josh calls Kayla, saying that he has to postpone their plans because he's feeling sick. Hearing this, Kayla agrees to reschedule their dinner date. Later, Josh listens to Maggie rant about how her boyfriend made her feel underappreciated. Just as she finishes unloading, she apologizes for ranting and explains that no one knows her better than Josh. Just then, she smells something cooking in the kitchen. Josh remembers his quinoa and portobello mushrooms, and now that he has cancelled his date with Kayla, he hesitatingly asks Maggie if she wants to eat with him instead. Suddenly, Josh hears a banging noise, similar to a gavel sound. He excuses himself and proceeds to enter a courtroom, complete with a judge and an audience. The judge accuses him of performing boyfriend misconduct, but he pleads that he's not guilty. He asks if he doesn't have the right to rearrange a date, but the judge reveals that he's in court because he lied to Kayla. However, Josh corrects him as he waves a dictionary to prove his innocence. He claims that a lie is a falsehood and untruth, but all he did was alter plans without uttering any lies. The judge quotes what he said in the call with Kayla. He didn't cancel dinner because he was feeling sick and tired, but he did so because of Maggie. Josh isn't taking any of these accusations, and he claims that they can all jibber-jabber until they're mixed into a one-legged man. But in the end, he didn't do anything wrong. As he acts out what a one-legged man is, the people in the court laugh. He clarifies that he committed no offense and defies the court to prove otherwise. The audience applauds and the judge is left with no choice but to declare him innocent. As he leaves, he gives out some high fives which angers the judge. Josh and Maggie proceed to have dinner and they enjoy a bottle of wine. They begin to reminisce about their past until they talk about their explicit memories. Now slightly tipsy, Maggie touches Josh's hands and sweetly looks at him. This summons Josh back to court. There, he explains that friends are allowed to touch each other's hands. He even sarcastically asks the judge if he'll also ban high fives and fist bumps, which makes the audience laugh. Just then, the judge talks about the wine, so Josh brings out his trusty dictionary to explain what it is. The judge claims he knows what wine is, but is more concerned about what it indicates. Josh explains that there's a precedent for grown-ups sharing a bottle of wine. If this is the case, the judge asks when was the last time that he shared a bottle of wine with Mike while touching his hand. Josh defensively argues that they can jibber-jabber all day until they're mixed into a three-legged horse at a rodeo. Considering his first attempt at this joke was the total punchline, he expected to have the same warm response. However, only one woman laughs, and Josh casually thanks her. He then tells the judge that he has done nothing wrong. Due to the lack of evidence, the court is forced to rule in Josh's favor. As Josh leaves, the judge reminds everyone not to high-five him. However, the woman who laughed does, which makes the judge pissed. Josh returns to Maggie, who's already yawning on the couch. As she stretches her muscles, he can't help but stare at her exposed belly, making him think of other things. Maggie says she should probably go, but Josh suggests watching Carnival, a show that they never got to finish. Suddenly, the gavel bangs again, and Josh returns to court. He explains to the judge that people watch shows together, but the judge argues that Maggie was about to leave, and he made her stay. He says this is where everything becomes a full-blown date. The word triggers Josh, so he grabs his dictionary to define what a date is. The crowd groans as he defends himself with the dictionary again. Josh claims that a date is a romantic outing, which he didn't do with Maggie. However, the judge explains the obvious signs. They're sitting on the couch and watching Carnival. Josh defends himself, strongly arguing that he's not the kind of guy that cheats. Once again, he tries to gain the crowd's approval with his jibber-jabber punchline. However, he's run out of variations. Josh says he didn't do anything wrong, and the judge claims that he technically didn't yet. Josh uses this statement against him, saying that the words came right out of his mouth that he's innocent. With no choice, the judge sighs, then tells him to remember this day as the moment when the blind Justice Lady took her own life. He adds that it's with great shame and utter disgust that the court is forced to rule out in favor of Josh. Just as the gavel hits, Josh speeds to the door and thanks the judge. He quickly returns to the couch, where Maggie snuggles in his arms as they watch. Suddenly, she starts kissing his neck, but Josh pulls away and contemplates his decisions. He finally gives in, kissing Maggie while taking her clothes off. The gavel beats hard, but Josh doesn't even bother to go to court anymore. The judge wonders where Josh is, and he says he knew he was going to sleep with Maggie. The next morning, Josh wakes up next to Maggie. Suddenly, he gets a call from Kayla, asking him if he's feeling better. She asks if he wants to have dinner that night, but Josh only tells her that they should stop seeing each other. Kayla falls silent, then she says that everything's abrupt. Josh apologizes, but she already wants to drop the call. With Kayla out of the way, Josh thinks about making frittatas for Maggie's breakfast. He happily prepares this and even puts fresh flowers on the table. Just then, Maggie steps into the kitchen, already dressed in her coat. She says she's so hungover, so Josh reassures her that his frittatas will be the perfect remedy. However, Maggie admits that last night was a mistake. She tells him to pretend it never happened, but Josh thinks they reconnected and says they finished Carnival last night. Maggie doesn't recall any of this. She then shakes Josh's hand and leaves. Just as she heads out the door, Kayla comes in with a disappointed look. She says she only came to get her things, but she just saw Maggie. Josh apologizes, saying that they were drunk and Maggie was taking advantage of him. Despite the betrayal, Kayla keeps her composure and merely tells Josh that he sucks. When she finally leaves, the gavel hits, summoning Josh back to court.
Subscribe to watch more videos like this. Turn on notifications. And leave a like, it really helps the channel out. Thank you for watching.